Good day, everybody. Today at Kitchen Table, I'm happy to welcome Alex Van Ham. Alex Van Ham is an independent journalist and the founder of Freebird Media. Freebird Media is based in Toronto, the real capital of Canada, for those who don't know. You can check out Freebird Media at their website, freebirdmedia.ca for Canada, or on the Freebird YouTube channel. And without further ado, here is Alex. All right, so thank you very much, Alex, for joining me today. At the kitchen table today, I have Alex Van Ham. Alex is the founder of Freebird Media out of Toronto. And today we're going to talk a little bit about his experience with Freebird, some of the stories he's covered, and the general state of being an independent media outlet in the Great White North. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks for inviting me to be on your show.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to have you. So, just to start off, a little bit of kind of, the usual background stuff. How did Freebird start? What was your kind of motivation to get it up off the ground?
Okay, so I had a background in journalism because I went to grad school for journalism, and then, but when I finished school, I was having a hard time finding a job in that industry, so I was doing working in landscaping and other things like that, and then eventually just thinking about getting back into it independently or something. And then in October 2016, Dr. Jordan Peterson, who's now famous, so most people are probably familiar with his name. Jordan Peterson was just sort of starting to come back into the public consciousness because he was taking a stand against compelled gender pronouns at U of T and political correctness in general in academia. And so there was a support rally that I went to in his defense after he was getting reprimanded for a YouTube video he released. And then I was at this rally, and there was all these SJWs that were attacking the rally sort of and shutting it down. And so I was witnessing all this stuff go around, and Jordan Peterson came out to speak, and that's when the whole free speech controversy kind of took over, and I realized that everything that people were saying in the media was sort of not correct at all because of what I was witnessing at these rallies and stuff. And so I thought, okay, I got kind of, the one thing I like about Jordan Peterson is that he was right. Well, I like that he took a stand against the far left because most people weren't. So I was kind of inspired by him in that way, and I started this platform that is like a free speech platform. So it was directly inspired by him, and I suppose. And then I have a website and there's a YouTube channel. So we started in October 2016, and trying to just host a whole bunch of different controversial opinions. And I had a lot of different student contributors at first, but more so now the content is geared towards libertarians and conservatives and stuff like that, because it's hard to find left-wing people that want to contribute. But it is by definition a nonpartisan platform dedicated to free speech. So that's basically who we are and how we started.
Cool. So the Jordan Peterson rally you're talking about, that was, I guess, the big protest at U of T that a lot of the viral video footage came from. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct. There's the one that to this day I think has the most views is pretty funny because I'm in the video standing next to Peterson, and as he's being grilled by these SJWs, you can see the expression on my face. I'm pretty confused and disgusted because until you've actually interacted with these SJW crowds in person, it just seems trivial. But then there's a lot of adrenaline that goes on at these rallies because they're screaming in your face, and there's like a lot of them, and you realize how absurd the whole thing is. And it seemed like a big parody at first until I realized the scale of it and how this ideology is really been spread beyond the scale of what most people understand. And then I started to panic a little bit because the political correctness, this was all before the election happened. So I thought Donald Trump was not going to be president, and Hillary Clinton was take over, and this political correctness was going to continue to spiral more and more out of control. So I was like, oh my god, because a lot of people, I think, the media doesn't give them a clear understanding of what's going on. So, and I grew up in a rural area outside of the city, and I was like, people back home won't believe this. Like, if I try to explain this to them just over coffee, they're gonna assume I'm exaggerating everything. So I was like, I need to show them what these people are like, because they're absurd.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It is kind of when you see these videos on YouTube of like SJW protests and rallies and them shouting other people down and all these antics, it's easy to laugh it off in a way, or to kind of, poke fun at it. These people are kind of just like lol cows or whatever, but I think it's a good point. I mean, when you are directly affected by it, whether it's because you're like there facing them directly, or it starts to affect your job, your school, like it's not so much a laughing matter anymore.
Exactly. It's a lot worse than the average person realizes.
Right. So what has it been like then, trying to get Freebird up off the ground? Like, what have some of your struggles been when you're kind of dealing with such a...
Well, I think when I jumped into this, I was a bit naive, and so over the course of 2 years, I've learned a whole bunch of things and had a lot of black pill experiences. So
no doubt.
I've sometimes people accuse me of being ideological, but I'm actually none. So my opinions themselves have upgraded a lot, I'd say, over time, because I'm being exposed to a lot of new things, and then having experiences in a lot of ways is interesting. So one thing I would say is that we had almost instantly we were attacked by these left-leaning outlets as being like far-right people, because we interview a bunch of people who are controversial, even though we haven't endorsed any of their views, but just the fact that we feature them,
right,
just smeared, right? So I think that I think that I was sort of I was more of a centrist when I started this, and then there's a scene that sort of evolved around Jordan Peterson and people like Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin and those sorts of personalities, and I was kind of fans of them at first, and then I grew out of it, and now I can't stand them. But I look at it and I think like that is some people think that now I've become too I give too much voice to the far right, but the thing is, like, I think that I was always, a lot of people regard white people now as a threat, as you got to be careful around them. So that it's a very elitist club in media, right? And who gets sort of picked up and endorsed and stuff, because you have to vet people and make sure they're not going to say anything too controversial. And so I always felt like people were hesitant to talk to me even before I even expressed certain things. So at a certain point, I was like, there's really no point in trying to protect any sort of reputation, because a lot of this stuff is sort of like a prepackaged ideological thing in and of itself. Like the whole Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin thing, they have very strong views on race in certain ways and stuff like that. So you have to definitely play along in the certain narrative, otherwise you're never going to get any attention from the sender either, right? So right. One thing I like about being completely independent now is that I can just say whatever I actually think and want to say, and it's a great feeling in that way, in that sense, because developing an organic audience by just being yourself it takes longer, and it can be frustrating because it's a gradual process than some of these other people that, like Ben Shapiro, that are get this big funding right off the bat, and they're syndicated, and they get the overnight audience, right? It's like a bought and paid for audience, so it's not people don't care as much as people that grow to trust somebody over time that's developing completely independent and organically. And so I'm sort of banking on that for the future, because we get ignored by a lot of people, both on the left and the right and the center, I think, just because everyone is nervous. But at the same time, our numbers keep going up. So got to do something. Guess we're doing something right.
Yeah, definitely. That's for sure encouraging. So have you found, I talked about a month ago to a fellow in Toronto you might be familiar with, Lawrence McCurry, who writes...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
who writes for Your Ward News, which is an independent publication in Toronto that's going through a lot of controversy. We'll just leave it at that.
Uh-huh.
But I imagine you've kind of had a similar experience to them in some ways, because when I was talking to Lawrence, one of the things he said was, despite all the controversy that they face publicly and privately, but they also get a lot of private support. You know, people who are maybe feeling a bit too intimidated to publicly support them, but who, you know, privately will say, I endorse what you're doing. Keep up the good fight. Like, don't let people shut you down. Have you found some of that?
Yeah, for sure. That doesn't surprise me at all. That's really funny. I know Lawrence, and hilarious. It's because James Sears is the main editor of Your Ward News, and it's because I interviewed him that is the main thing that people use when they accuse Freebird Media of being like a far right platform and stuff. They always say, "Well, look at here, he interviewed James Sears," which I think is hilarious because James Sears is a master level troll, and
Absolutely.
The way that they take the bait is just sort of like hilarious. It's so funny.
I know, it's like it never fails. I mean, he could put any kind of bait out there, and it never fails. It's a good analysis.
So you know who else is super reliable and great is the CBC, because I have this picture with Jordan Peterson where we're holding a Pepe flag.
Yeah, that was something I was going to ask you about. Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about the Jordan Peterson and the Pepe?
Yeah, so funny. Last year in June, so almost a year ago, because I've been covering all these student politics, all this free speech stuff related to the academic world, I was invited to be the speaker at this event that this student free speech group was holding called the Freedom Summit. Excuse me. And it was headlined by Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro were each speakers. And then there was like a student panel with myself and two other internet student blogger types. And so we, at the event afterwards, I was in this, there was like a very brief time in the back room where these people who donated to the event got to like get a picture with Jordan Peterson and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was there, and one of the guys that used to take photos for me, who's a photographer, he brought the Pepe flag, so it wasn't even mine. I didn't even know, and he busted it out like right at the time, and he's like, "Yo, let's try to get a picture with Peterson with this." And I was like, "He'll never do it," but we asked him on impulse, and he was like, "Okay," and he stood there and took that picture, and we got this picture. The other guy in the photo is giving like the okay sign, and
right.
And then there's Jordan Peterson, and then the Pepe flag, and then me with this huge ear-to-ear grin. And then afterwards, I was like, I can't believe you let us do that. So the next day after that event, I posted it because I was like, this is going to be hilarious. It's going to drive like all these leftists nuts. And then only like there was a couple local like Antifa type groups that like had a little conniption fit the next day on social media about it, but not almost like no attention. And I was like confused because I was thinking like this should be really inflammatory, but no one's noticing. And then time went by, and it was like 7 months later when Jordan Peterson finally did like an interview with CBC, and he sat down, and he had just gotten in that weird exchange with Kathy Newman over in England where he like embarrassed her in that conversation. Yeah. And then the very next week, the CBC tried to like ambush him again with that photo, and they're like, "Look at this!" Like, and they're always implying that we're like white supremacists and stuff. So they're like, what do you have to say about this?" And they pulled that picture, and I was like, "Ha!" Because I thought, this is the game, and I'm like, checkmate. Because the whole thing with Pepe is, if you take the time to actually like look into it, it's a symbol that's like a Rorschach image, and it is used to make fun of people by whatever they project onto the image. Yeah. Right. They're always calling people like neo-Nazis, and we're not like neo-Nazis. So it's like the frog is mocking them, and the more they like insist that it's a white power thing without researching it for themselves, the funnier it is, right? So then, sure enough, the CBC they bust out this photo, and they're like, "Look at this," and like explain this. And then I thought that would be the perfect time for Jordan to be like, I know that's Alex and like and from Freebird, and like this is just these guys like he calls it like the Kek boys, right? But he could have been like, these are just Kekistanis that are like making fun of identity politics and the left narrative and stuff. Because he knew Jordan was front and center for that whole event, and he saw us talk. So, and earlier I talked about what Freebird Media was and stuff, which is why I thought he'd be able to address that photo by knowing who we were. But he sort of like, just like cucked out of it. I thought by just being like, well, I don't really know, and I don't necessarily like condone this, and blah blah blah. But so I thought like that was a wasted opportunity to make a point about to the left about like what that symbol was about. Because I knew it would get picked up by CBC. It just took longer than I thought. But they did bust it out and try to pull that. And it would have been a good time to elaborate on what it meant, but he's just sort of backed out, which was disappointing. But point is, it's definitely easy to troll the left with symbols like that.
Oh, yeah. I know. It's like too easy. You almost start to feel bad.
Yeah.
But I saw that interview on CBC too, and they definitely, were trying to set him up for the gotcha moment. And I was surprised that he didn't, and I mean, who knows what's on the editing room floor, I guess, but I was surprised that he didn't articulate that a bit more, because
yeah, me too.
Even on his own channel and in interviews he's done himself, especially with people like Jonathan Pajot, he's discussed Pepe at great lengths and kind of the symbolism and the culture around it, and so I was surprised too that he seemed to shy away a little bit from that.
Well, I'll tell you my this is just my opinion on this, but I'll tell you my personal opinion on this. And as I said, I started Freebird because I was inspired by Jordan Peterson, and then over time I've become very uninspired by him. I rather dislike most of his views now. But I'll say this: I think that what it is that he's connected to the UN, and at the end of the day, he is definitely a globalist. And but I think by hijacking the opposition to these goofy leftists, by making it all about this absurd gender argument, because at the end of the day, the whole gender thing is pretty goofy, and I think anybody with half a brain can really see through it. Yeah. He sort of becomes a hero for that, and then he refuses to talk about right-wing identity politics, and he, I think, falsely equates right-wing identity politics with left-wing identity politics. So as I did at first, because I was like a fan of his, so I would hear him say stuff like that, and I would say, oh, that must be true. And then as a journalist, the more I would look into certain things, I realized like right-wing identity politics are a lot different than the left, and there's a lot of different stuff going on. I've talked to different professors that have elaborated things that I've tried to bring to Professor Peterson's attention that he seems like to be consciously like ignoring or like putting down, and when he keeps stressing certain points. And so I think that he is part of this club along with like the other approved personalities where they're you can't talk about race, but you can talk about gender all day long because it's kind of like a goofy distraction. Right. So I think that on CBC he's never going to actually acknowledge Freebird Media or really endorse me or any of or Freebird or anyone that's like further to the right than him or that talks about racial issues. So for him, that's why I think he's a disingenuous in that way, or not that heroic, because I think he just consciously won't go near certain people that are dangerous. And the whole thing about being like a free speech defender and absolutist is definitely nonsense. And I also have a video on my channel on Freebird of him being confronted at an event last year called The Stifling of Free Speech on University Campuses, which was like this big event that he spoke at, and someone in the audience asked him why Faith Goldie had been removed from the panel. And so his response is on the channel, and he basically says, I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically says, "Oh, she became too hot of a topic," and I just thought that was like a very hypocritical, considering what he's supposed to be like the big advocate for, right? Because obviously you don't have to endorse anybody's views, but why not talk about something so relevant? But because Faith Goldie is connected to discussions on race now, like she's just too hot of a topic. So I just think he's a fake overall.
Yeah, I was quite disappointed in that too, and I attended that same lecture panel, I guess, with Gad Sad, Oren Amte, and Jordan Peterson that Faith was disinvited from. And I thought it was really unfortunate because as much as Faith Goldie's work and opinions can be polarizing, I guess, I mean, I feel like she got an unfair reputation.
For sure.
Like, I mean, granted, she was at the Charlottesville rally that ended like so tragically with that woman passing away. But I mean, she wasn't there in support. You know, she was really just doing her job. She wasn't marching with anybody, and it was like just an insane luck of the draw that she happened to be there when that woman was hit by the car.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like just, you know, really no planning or any kind of foresight on her part could have warned her what was going to happen, right? So
yeah, and people don't realize either. Like after that happened, she was like in a very dangerous place when people, because her people were spreading right on the internet, on social media immediately. White supremacist Faith Goldie is down there, so a lot of people were telling her, you got to get off the streets, you got to hide immediately. People are going to find you, like, and kill you. So she was like, after all that happened, she's like in a place that she doesn't belong, and almost trapped and like worried about stuff. And eventually, I don't think she'd gone to sleep before she ended up being on that podcast where she was talking to somebody, because as a journalist, she was willing to talk to anyone that wanted to talk to her. And I know that she didn't realize that the podcast she was even on was owned by the Daily Stormer. So like that's something that gets lost in the narrative too when they talk about that whole incident. Which I understand people say, well, it was a responsibility, but I'm like, I don't want to speak on her behalf. I just think people don't know the actual story in proper context. So I think she got a bad rap for sure. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying, and like one of the big impetus behind Freebird Media is that the mainstream gets things wrong or willfully omits parts of the story so often that, especially when you become more personally involved in these kinds of things, it really is like a huge eye-opener about how biased most of the coverage that most people see really is.
For sure. And in my opinion, the longer you're in the game, the more black-pilled you become. You realize almost everything is corporate-controlled stuff. Even the supposed, a lot of the alternative stuff is really just like a corporate product. I'm very, very skeptical about how, like, Jordan Peterson's following, for example, how organic it is. And I know Ben Shapiro's is like completely, pretty much a bot audience. So, like I said, I don't think there's any very honest alternative media out there that has a large size right now. Like, I'm not a big fan of the rebel media either. So, I think there's a serious media problem in Canada in general for like good quality media that's even reasonably unbiased.
Yeah, the Rebel is really... I'm surprised they're still going, to be honest.
I am too.
Because, yeah, they really... and I think it was almost like instant karma with the way Ezra dealt with Faith Goldie, which I also felt she kind of got the short end of the stick on.
For sure. No loyalty there at all.
No. I was really... I was really shocked by, especially, I mean, I was disappointed, I guess, with Peterson's response to Faith, but I was more surprised that even her employer, Rebel, and I mean, really, along with a few of the other early personalities on Rebel, like Faith was a staple of that network, right? So,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was really surprised how she was treated after that.
I think Canada needs just like a homegrown media platform for run by Canadians that don't have any loyalties outside of just Canada and being Canadian and wanting to make non-sensational media, I guess. Even though that sounds like it's a bit of a contradiction, because I like publishing controversial opinions, but I don't want to. I find a lot of people, even on the right, they really just sensationalize narratives by publishing dramatic, oversimplified headlines on things.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't want to go down that road either. I just feel it just seems slimy.
Yeah, that's definitely something you can appreciate for sure. But besides the Jordan Peterson kind of ongoing drama, you've covered a lot of other local stories around Toronto that have turned into either national or international headlines. I guess the biggest one being the Lindsay Shepherd kind of scandal.
Yeah, that was cool. I'm proud of that. We managed to get ahead of the mainstream on like about half a dozen stories this year. So we got some cool, like the Lindsay Shepherd thing. We were there from the very beginning. We have like the live stream of her delivering the Laurier Statement of Principles to the administrators and the first rally that they held in her honor and stuff. So we got some really cool footage there. And Rick Mehta, he ended up becoming international news, or at least national news, in more than one story in a short amount of time. And we were the first ones to talk to him about what was going on out east. And then most recently, Faith Gouldy and I went to the border together, and there's an illegal port of entry at Roxham Road, and I live streamed what we were seeing there, and that got a huge reaction. And later that week, it became like much more of a mainstream issue, and now it's been like talked about frequently. So I don't know if that was all coincidence, but I know we were there about a week before them and live streaming stuff, and that's when stuff on the internet really started to go, crazy.
Right. So just a little bit of background for anyone who might end up listening who's not familiar with these stories. Lindsay Shepherd was a graduate student at Wilfrid Laurier University who, in one of her tutorial classes, showed a video clip of Jordan Peterson debating on TV Ontario, which is it's a state-sponsored TV broadcast. So, just that adds a huge level of absurdity to the whole story, because she was later reprimanded for showing this video in her class. And, there's tons of information on it out there. So this has been kind of an ongoing controversy in Canada since that happened, I think about a year ago now. And most recently, she's moved to sue the university, the professors in her department who reprimanded her, and an employee of the university who's part of the, I think it's the Gender and Diversity Board, something like that. But and like I said, you guys were on the ground for a lot of that. And again, like in the heat of all these protests going on. Excuse me.
Yeah, that was good timing.
Definitely. So, have you noticed, as someone who's kind of on the ground covering these things, I guess a lot of familiar faces? Do you find that these protests from Antifa on the left against people like Lindsay and Peterson and free speech advocates, do you find that they're kind of growing in momentum and steam, or do you kind of see like the same 5 people every time?
There's it's like a music scene. I think that a lot of them are LARPing. So I think Hamilton has their own little scene, and a lot of them are being arrested. I think they had the Lock Street incident happen a while ago when they've been arresting people even this week. So I think Hamilton has their own little club of goons, and then Toronto has a little club of goons, and then I have a lot of photos of at different events. So I recognize some, but I think that the people that are in Antifa are all kind of like losers, and they don't have jobs or anything, and they're like it's just down season right now, and then when the next election cycle revs up, they'll come out of the woodwork more. So right now there's not like a whole lot of them, but they're around. And I was just in Greece for 2 weeks, and I was looking at like a lot of the historic stuff, but there's Antifa graffiti all over Greece, and so like Antifa in general, like in Europe, are still like very active and like doing stuff. But here in Toronto, I think it's just like they're all hibernating till the media whips them up again.
Yeah, I thought it was funny at the free speech rally that we were talking about earlier that Faith was disinvited from. It was kind of funny because you expected it to be heavily protested, but it turned out to be like kind of a unseasonably cold, rainy day. It was a little bit outside of town, kind of off the main public transport routes, and there was not a protester in sight.
Yeah, strategically it's horrible for Antifa, so they're just lazy, and they're like, we're not going that far out of our way, and I guess they just get low in morale and don't bother. It's like, that's why you got to avoid the downtown. That's just a particularly good venue for the strategic layout of it.
Yeah. Yeah, but the other thing I found, I guess, like, kind of strange and fascinating about going to that event, though, was how well attended it was. Like, and maybe this is something that's struck you too, but you don't really expect to see like 1,000 people lined up in the cold to go listen to a few academics speak.
True.
Like it seems like something you expect to see at like a concert or an entertainment venue. So I felt like that was almost like it was encouraging in a way to see the support that that Peterson had at the time, but it was also kind of an uncomfortable reminder of where our culture was at, I guess, that this is, and it was something Peterson spoke to a bit too, I think, in his lecture, that, it was great to see everybody there, but it was also kind of an uncomfortable reminder of where we're at.
Yeah.
In terms of free speech and the dialogue between different ideologies, and like, was that something that, I don't know, I'm curious to hear from other people who attended, like if that was something that struck you as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm trying to write a book right now that I can self-publish by the end of the summer, based on the last 2 years of all these events, because I have photos and stuff like that, and it's about like just how kind of out of control the radical left is. So talking like Dr. Amate at that event, for example, spoke about, he had all these examples of how he's constantly harassed by these psychotic SJWs, and that's just one aspect of like these. There's almost like there's a slang term in the States like Trump derangement syndrome.
Yes.
There's like a derangement going on en masse in this city, and I'm trying to express it with these photos and these events of these insane radical leftists that are it's like a cult with a really simplistic mindset, and they're highly emotional. And I've heard Jordan Peterson's research break down like their personality profiles and why they are like this, and they're just like foaming at the mouth, insane people. And they're getting produced like in a little, it's like academia is a factory now that just pumps out these little clones with this weird ideology, and it's creepy and funny at the same time.
Yeah, it's almost like, well, you may as well laugh as cry, right? So.
Oh yeah, they're totally, for lack of like more eloquent words, like they're just completely half-baked potatoes, and they just like have no concept of history. They're totally emotion based, and they think that they're educated, and they're all the reason that the strength is that all these fake disciplines that they're all getting degrees in, like gender studies, they don't have any employable skills when they're done, and so in order to sort of like give them anything, that all these pseudo disciplines teach them to be unified social activists. So they read like Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, and they're pretty good at like organizing and shutting down events and stuff because they're unified. The thing about the left is that because it's such a simplistic ideology and it's like a uniform ideology, it's different. Like on the right, you have all these different types of people with their own philosophies going on, but on the left, it's more of a unified thing. So all these kids are just getting this training on how to be these little activists, and then they have nothing else to do, and they can't get a job when they finish, so they go out and they engage in this new game of, I guess, reappropriating wealth via social, holding people hostage, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting too, like, you did a great interview with Benjamin Boyce. I'm not sure how long ago, sorry. But it's up on YouTube if anyone wants to check it out. And Benjamin is an employee at Evergreen College in Washington State, which has experienced like just a complete breakdown over SJW protests and student unrest and Antifa kind of pressure, and it really has basically like crippled the college at this point. And
yep, their enrollment's way down. That's why this radical leftism. I was trying to figure out if this is a metaphor or if I mean this literally, but it's cancer. and it can't do anything good. It can only destroy things. So like all these institutions are learning the hard way that they're going to get like completely destroyed by social justice, whether it's Marvel Comics and like their business, or it's political groups or universities. Like all you're going to do, like everyone's afraid to stand up to social justice, but it's like at the end of the day you're going to destroy yourself because it can't actually generate any sort of productive growth or anything. It can only like break down whatever you're dealing with. So people might as well just learn to stand up to it, because it's cancerous. It destroys things. All these colleges, their enrollment's way down. I shudder to think what like Harvard and Yale and stuff would even be like 5 years from now, like what they're teaching, because they're completely run by SJWs now.
Yeah. Well, I think it was, I might be mistaken, but I think it was Yale who decided that they would kind of revamp their English department.
Yeah.
And kind of take the, what most people would know as like the canon of English literature, and basically, scrap it and say it's not diverse enough. And that breaks my heart, really. Like,
for sure, I have an English degree, and it breaks mine too, and it's absurd. And this is why I don't believe in multiculturalism, and why I don't like large-scale demographic change, because people think that the Western culture is going to survive like this large influx of massive immigration from traditional non-Western places, right? And I'm like, there's no reason for groups, once they're a certain size, to honor or value like the heritage of Canada, and so they won't, and you'll just see it eviscerated in the name of equality. So I don't think any of that stuff's going to last, and it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah, but it was interesting with your discussion with Benjamin, because you could really see the parallels between what's happening with Lindsay Shepherd and Wilfrid Laurier, and what happened at Evergreen with Brett Weinstein. And it was almost like the same template. And like you guys were saying, it was just like, one piece of identity politics swapped out for another. Whereas in Lindsay's case, the controversy was generated over a gender pronoun discussion. And in Brett Weinstein's case, it was generated over a discussion around race. And really, it's, like you guys were saying, it's the same template, the same kind of language, the same kind of tactics, just, one piece of identity swapped out for another.
Yep. A lot of all of that progressivism and that left-wing stuff is really rooted in resentment. And so, like I said, it can only target things and try to attack them. It can't really do anything positive.
Yeah.
It's it's simplistic for sure. So.
Yeah, and it's very. It's upsetting, because you see institutions that you used to have faith in and admire and respect for, and just kind of like crumbling under the pressure of these politics, basically. So it's discouraging, but I guess not to be a total downer about it. I think you're probably a great example of this. It's also generated some backlash and motivated people to speak up and be like a counter to this kind of insanity.
Oh, for sure. And the backlash is predictable. And so anyone that is really paying attention is already thinking farther down the line, because the backlash to all of this cultural Marxism is unavoidable, and it'll be big, and it's coming. So, like the globalists, for example, are thinking, how do we get ahead of the whole national? There's going to be a rise in nationalism both in Europe and in North America. And so the question is, how do people respond to it in different ways? Because it's the cultural Marxism is it's going to produce a predictable reaction. It already is starting to, and it'll get worse. And so when the next election cycle starts up for 2020, that's when you'll see everything accelerate. And the cultural Marxism, because these schools are still, producing these little ideologues, mm-hmm. and they're the ones that provoke the nationalism as a reaction. And so it's a predictable thing for sure. And not just national, but even just the people like me that are just independents that want to speak up. Like, there's going to be just more and more people having a visceral reaction to this cultural Marxism.
Definitely. And I mean, I don't want you to age yourself too explicitly or anything, but do you mind if I ask when you did your English degree?
Oh, sure, yeah. I always like hilarious. I like to. I'm 30. I'm about to turn 32, so most people think I'm younger than that, which is funny. But I did my English degree at Carleton. I started when I was 21, and I finished when I was 25. So, 2006 or 7, I think I started at Carleton in Ottawa.
Okay, yeah, because I also I was a graduate student. I finished my degree in 2016. But I had a big break. Like I did my undergrad around the same time that you did your degree at Carleton, at Ottawa U. So like late 2000s, like 2008 range. And I didn't really notice. I mean, maybe it was kind of the classes I took, or, wasn't really involved in a lot of university clubs or student organizations. So maybe it was there and I didn't notice it. But I really didn't notice a lot of this uber political correctness, social justice activism really affecting the university as an undergrad. But then when I went back as a graduate student in 2014, it seemed to have, like, the atmosphere had changed.
Yeah, things accelerated fast.
Yeah. So I was curious kind of what your experience as a university student was. Like if you kind of saw any foreshadowing of this, or if it influenced or affected your academic pursuits at all.
Oh yeah, for sure. In hindsight, I realized the seeds were all there, but it wasn't. When I was younger, I was more of like just a naive kid, and like most people, cliche, you're on the left when you're younger, just because you don't know as much. So I was just like going with the flow as an English grad, and I didn't really question it too much, except for in my fourth year there. I had different professors that were like definitely. Like I had Aboriginal lit courses, and the professor was like I think he either went to the residential schools or he just had a big thing about them. But he like seemed very like aggressive towards whites, and like me. Like I had to like definitely. It was stressful for me to just try to give him what he wanted to get through the course, like by saying all the right stuff and like being very like super sympathetic and all about Aboriginal rights and stuff like that. So there were some professors back then that were pretty militant that were like made me uncomfortable, but the culture overall didn't really I didn't really pick up on that being a problem, like the political correctness stuff. But in hindsight, I also realized like Carleton was even more PC than Ottawa U, and all that stuff was there, like the seeds. It was just smaller, and then when the numbers started to get bigger, then it just accelerated so fast. But like a lot of I remember there being a lot of anti-Israel groups at Carleton when I was going there, and different student activist groups and stuff. But they were just they didn't really get in my way, so I didn't really notice them that much. But now that they're bigger, they have more influence. They're more of an issue.
Yeah, Carleton definitely is kind of leads the way in that sense for the Ottawa region. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, I kind of found the same thing. Ottawa U, it had, like you said, some of the pro-Palestinian student groups, but and some other, I guess, in hindsight, I can kind of see in the curriculum that kind of focus. But yeah, it really wasn't as stifling as when I went back as a graduate student. And I did my graduate degree on the West Coast, so maybe that was a factor as well. But I'm always interested to hear from people who have been in the university as students, like how that culture kind of affected their studies. And for me, it became so kind of discouraging that that when I finished my degree, I left, right? Like initially I had wanted to do a PhD, kind of make a career as an academic, and the level of ideology and polarization between ideologies really just, sent me packing. Like,
I can imagine. I wouldn't, as a guy, I wouldn't have lasted as long as you did. So I couldn't imagine being there now. Oh my God.
right. So, you were saying earlier that initially Freebird had quite a few student writers, and if anyone wants to check out the website, there's a lot of different articles there on a range of topics from different writers. Do you find you are still getting much interest from students, or has there been kind of like a silencing effect where people are afraid for their academic reputations, or?
Yeah, and also just a lot of students that were following us in the beginning just over time disagreed with me on a lot of political stuff, and then they just sort of view Freebird as a risk because we have no problem talking with white identitarians, for example, and like the students are extremely sensitive to that kind of stuff. So a lot of them are just see it as too right wing to contribute to anymore, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I always feel like it's very sad when people feel like they can't participate or they can't openly have an opinion because it might damage another aspect of their life or their career or their pursuits. Like,
well, I feel like in my experiences that with the student groups that are based on free speech, there's a large percentage of it is inauthentic. So there's a lot of sort of hypocrites in those groups in general, and they're not usually real free speech groups at the end of the day. So that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, though, because like I've heard you say in other interviews, there's a lot of talk about free speech, but when it comes right down to it for a lot of people, or a lot of, I guess, pundits or commentators, the veneer cracks pretty quickly, right? I mean, as soon as the shoe's on the other foot and the dialogue is being directed at them, then it's not such a free speech absolutist anymore.
For sure, and there's definitely strong taboos, like race is a strong one, or talking about Jews, for example, or anything like that. Those are very off-topic things, even in free speech circles. So you know, and I think that just I'm naturally drawn to want to read up on things that people tell me I'm not supposed to like read up on. It's just like a natural knee-jerk reaction, and so I myself have just learned a lot about looking in the last 2 years, just looking into stuff that I'm not, like, people aren't supposed to talk about. And I'm like, why doesn't anyone want to talk about this? And then at the end of the day, I get skeptical that people are really about free speech because, Gad Saad will say he's a free speech absolutist and he believes in, disinfecting with sunlight is the expression, right? But but at the end of the day, they don't want to. They're afraid of like letting the ideas even come to the table, which makes me skeptical of their true motives sometimes.
Yeah, and their real commitment to free speech as an issue.
Exactly.
Yeah, but back to a little bit, I guess, what we were getting at earlier. Ontario's just been through an election cycle, so this, I guess, will be the Ontario segment, and we saw basically like a little microcosm, I guess, of the U.S. election in a way.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
The thing about grassroots populism is it's unavoidable, and it's the silent majority that always like the media is so left wing that they're always and they're loud, so they're always talking about the polls, how close they are, but and then it's always like this sweep, this absolute crush.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like going into our provincial election here in Ontario a couple weeks ago, the polls were, for the most part, putting the NDP party, which is like a far left party in Canada, kind of neck and neck with the Conservative, who had a very populist leader, Doug Ford. If that name sounds familiar to people, it's because that is Rob Ford's brother, infamous and deceased mayor of Toronto. Yeah, so the polls were really putting like, oh, it's going to be close, the NDP might take it. And then it was a huge sweep, right? Doug Ford and the Progressive Conservatives took a really easy majority in the provincial legislature. So, and it was interesting too to see. I mean, it was interesting, but it was like facepalm material too, because leading up to the election, it was like they learned nothing from the U.S., right? Like even Kathleen Wynne, the former premier, was making these comparisons between Doug Ford and Donald Trump and calling him a bully and saying, oh, we don't want an American-style election, and like using all of these kind of tactics that obviously failed for Hillary, and then just replayed them up here.
Yeah, the next day the CBC published an article, an opinion piece about how Doug Ford won because of straight white males and white supremacists and all this crap, and they just don't learn, and it just makes people double down.
Exactly. Yeah, it makes people double down.
That's why they're gonna lose. They're too ideological, and they can't really see the future very well. I can't imagine how bad it's gonna be in 2019 when the next election thing begins with them getting out of control.
Yeah. Well, and something, an issue that you've covered a fair bit on the Freebird site, which is kind of a pet issue of mine, is marijuana legalization and how the provinces are going about it. And that was a big part of Doug Ford's platform that really appealed to me, was that he promised to open up pot to a free market, basically, whereas the other parties wanted to have it a government monopoly over pot sales. Like the federal government here has said that they're going to legalize pot. Drug laws in Canada are federal, so the federal government has moved to legalize pot, and now the provinces are all trying to decide how they're going to enact that legislation. And our former premier here had set up all this infrastructure that it would be like a government-controlled substance, kind of like alcohol is in Ontario. It would be a total government monopoly. They had this terrible plan that was only going to include, I think, 10 storefronts for pot in the entire province of Ontario. Now, Ontario takes about 3 days to drive across, okay? So that should give you an idea of how insufficient their plan was. And so that's something I'm really hoping Doug Ford follows through with, because I think it would be a huge boon to our economy. And I just think it's the responsible way to treat your citizens, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm a big marijuana fan myself, and I like the system as it is right now in Toronto. I can pretty much just go to my store over on Spadina and grab whatever I need with my card, and it's just independent stores that are, little mom and pop type operations. I don't really see any need to bring the government in and complicate it more than it already is with, an LCBO type system or anything like that. I even wish that I think citizens should just be allowed to grow a certain number of plants themselves, like just de facto. So whoever is more open with the marijuana market would probably have my support the most at the end of the day. So yeah, I hope Ford does a good job with that stuff too.
Yeah, definitely. And it was really, for me, because I'd been on Vancouver Island for a few years where, they've had dispensaries, privately run dispensaries, regulated and licensed by the city of Victoria and Vancouver for years now, right? They've been really ahead of the game. And and it's worked so well there. It's created jobs. It's taken, pot sales off the street, basically. And, you have access to, all kinds of different quality products. And it just was so frustrating to me that Ontario and the other provinces, I guess, you have this example in BC, right? You have the template already. But, it was just kind of like a tax grab, basically, wanting to keep it all under government control.
Yep, it's true.
Right.
At least it's better than it was 10 years ago, I guess.
Yeah, true enough. Baby steps, I suppose.
True.
But yeah, so I mean, that's something Freebird, although you've been, fairly centered and focused on free speech issues, like people will find articles about, like, a variety of current events.
Yeah, I'm trying to diversify because without getting stuck on too many issues. But I like to try to get more content going on than I have right now. It's just it's hard to. We're a startup and we don't really have any profit yet, so I can't really hire other people. So I have some people that volunteer to help me with stuff, but it's hard to get like a full-time help like developing content. So since I'm focused on trying to make video and live stream interviews now, it's hard for me to get more stuff edited and put up on the website. But I would like to get more just more content in general for Canadians about different stuff going on in Canada related to free speech stuff and just politics in general.
Right. So do you have anything lined up in the near future for Freebird that you?
Well, a bunch of cool stuff. Going to be doing a lot more live streams, and I have some. I've been playing phone tag with Richard Spencer, and that's going to be a pretty interesting interview, I think. And he's the American guy who coined the term the alt-right, one of the prominent alt-right figures. And I know that by talking to him, that's going to make a lot of radical leftists and even centrists angry. So I'm excited for that. And in general, just going to be doing a lot. I've got just a few random people lined up this week, but I'm going to be doing a lot more live streaming on a regular basis. So our audience keeps growing, so I think that I'll be able to get more. I have a pretty good archive right now of interviews with politicians and smaller parties and stuff like that, but I think we're going to be able to get bigger names this summer. So I'm looking forward to a bunch of that stuff.
Excellent. That's very cool. Yeah, the Richard Spencer, that will definitely cause some screeching in the internet world.
Oh, for sure. I'm excited for that.
But, I mean, I'm not really, I'm no admirer of Spencer, but I do appreciate, I guess, his willingness to talk to people. Like, he doesn't seem to turn down in many interviews.
Yeah, I give him credit for that for sure.
Yeah.
And I haven't. There's some people I'm reaching out to that I haven't reached out to yet, but I've been planning to, that I'm going to pursue. That I hope I can. I want to talk to Jim Goad, who's the writer who wrote the Redneck Manifesto. Are you familiar with him at all?
I am, yeah. I came to know Jim Goad through Gavin McGinnis's show, actually.
Yeah, I think I might have first heard him there as well. But I'm going to start just aggressively pursuing him to try to talk to him. I think I can probably get him to talk to me if I go after him, because I'd love to talk to him. There's Ricardo Duchesne is my favorite person that I've interviewed so far, and the most interesting. I want to get another interview with him because he's a historical sociologist from out east at New Brunswick, and he's wrote some books on Western civilization that are really, really interesting. So I want to try to get another interview with him and just go see where things take me. There's Serena Singh who hosted that free speech event that you were at last year. She's doing another event soon that I'm hope to cover, and some stuff like that's going on too.
Great. So some more local stuff around Toronto and some interviews with people from far and wide. Sounds excellent.
Yeah, I want to really try to focus on just promoting Freebird as being Canadian and focused on Canadian issues. So then I wouldn't mind maybe just being able to go on some road trips around Canada to find unique stories or stuff that the mainstream won't cover, right? So people have been starting to reach out to me more, sending me messages about things to tip me off. So I'm going to try to... I think Faith Goldie and I did pretty good with that border stories. I want to try to pursue some more organic stories that are important that the mainstream doesn't go near. Because there's all kinds of stuff going on right now that you just don't hear about that's pretty big. So just got to find it.
Right, for sure. So, and then just I guess on a final note, I was kind of curious for your opinion on the state of comedy right now, because aside from how the kind of culture wars, I guess you could say, are affecting like our universities and our governments and our media institutions, comedy seems to be the entertainment sector that's been hardest hit.
Oh my God, yeah. When I first finished high school, I moved to Toronto and I went to Humber College and I got this 2-year diploma in comedy writing and performance. And then I was like trying to be a comic for a couple of years when I was like in my early 20s. And so I have sympathy for stand-up comics and whole art form and all of that. But now that I'm older, see what happens is like stand-up comedy is a niche arts community that tends by its nature to attract like beta male type people that are trying to compensate by like being self-deprecating and market themselves on whatever quirk they have.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like a feminine thing to begin with, and then over time, what's happened now with the culture is that it's just become like the stand-up. I don't know of any stand-up comics in Toronto that I like. Comedy to me has just become super like lame and like not funny and like politically correct garbage, and comics mostly just bitch and whine and like are unoriginal. There's only a few I like. I thought Dave Chappelle's comeback comedy was pretty funny, and I like Owen Benjamin in the States is doing some funny stuff. But like generally, comedy's just in a sad state. Everyone's doing like, and it was unavoidable because political correctness doesn't have a sense of humor, right? So
right.
That's why I said it's like cancer. There's another thing that's just killing off, like it's killing comedy for sure.
Absolutely, and I really enjoyed Dave Chappelle's first comeback special, but then
yeah, that's right. I think the second one was a lot less impressive.
Yeah, well, the second one, I felt like he spent half of it apologizing for the first one.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. I felt that way too.
Yeah, like and explaining himself for it, and I just thought, like, dude, you're the master. Like, you don't have to justify yourself to your audience. Like, just do your art.
Yep, that's how I felt as well. Too bad. It was unfortunate.
Yeah, well, Owen Benjamin is great. He's someone I've been following for a while.
His Soy Boy song that he plays on the piano, that's funny.
Yeah, and it's really, I don't know, like him or Paul Joseph Watson did it first, but that definitely has become like a viral kind of meme now.
Yeah. Do you know Sam Hyde?
No, sorry.
Okay. He's someone you should look into. He's hilarious. He had a show on Adult Swim like a year and a half ago or a year ago that got pulled because they thought he was like an alt-right comedian. But he's hilarious. And the first time I heard about him was like 5 years ago because he somehow lied his way into a TED Talk event and like pretended to be like this independent journalist and gave them this super sarcastic, like ridiculous TED Talk for like 10 minutes, like pretending it was real. And like it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. So you should look up Sam Hyde, like last name Hyde, Sam Hyde. Check him out.
All right. I will for sure. That sounds hilarious. I love the idea that he crashed a TED Talk.
Oh, that's great. You gotta see it.
All right. So, and everyone listening too, check that out. All right. Well, we're just a little bit over the hour mark, so I guess we'll wrap it up there. But I really appreciate you taking the time to join me at the kitchen table today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. And everyone, check out Freebird Media on YouTube and on their website, freebirdmedia.ca. You'll find some podcasts there as well. I'm not sure if those are on the YouTube also, or...
No.
Okay. So there's some good podcasts there, some more Canadian content, I guess. Interview with the Halifax 5 and Toronto Proud Boys. And stay tuned for more upcoming content.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Alex.
Take care.
All right. Thanks for stopping by and for sticking around today, everybody. If there's a guest that you would like to hear at the kitchen table, please leave it for me in the comments below. Or if you have anything of your own that you'd like to hear or see featured on Freethink Radio's website or on the playlist, please send it to us at freethinkradio@gmail.com. We actually will read your email, and there's a good chance we'll even get back to you. All right. Thanks again, everyone. Cheers.